Cool. Hi everyone. Yeah, welcome to Orthodoxy Hadder again. This time I went to Birmingham last weekend, over the weekend, and I met. Well, actually, we'll just get to that in a minute. But before I do that, I just want to say that yeah, of course, in about I think it's like 3 days now, we're going to be interviewing Father Stephen DeYoung on his book, The Religion of the Apostles. And that should be really interesting. It's probably going to be a lot more interesting than this at any rate. So without further ado, I want to just clear up some concerns, because obviously lots of people have been like, it's a satanic temple and you can't enter that. And obviously it was kind of perhaps seen as a controversial thing to do, I guess. So let me just say, first off, no random on the internet is a spiritual authority to me. Breaking news, none of you are a spiritual authority to me. You know who is? My spiritual father. And he's a hieromonk in Rokor. And I don't just make decisions to do controversial things without actually thinking about them or addressing my spiritual father about whether it's acceptable for me to do what I'm doing. And you can contact me for his details. I'll give you his phone number and his church if you want to fact check me. And he pretty much said, yes, as long as you're spiritually guarded. I mean, isn't that the whole point of the sacrifice of Christ? Isn't that the whole point of the resurrection? Isn't that the whole point of baptism? Isn't that the whole point of being filled with the Holy Spirit? Is that we clean the image of God in ourselves so that we are protected from evil spiritual forces and all this kind of stuff. So I understand why some people were like, oh, I'm unsubbed. I don't care. I don't care if you unsub. Fact of the matter is, for me, if I can go there and present authentic Christianity to the individual who I meet, Sheikh Asrar, then it seems like a perfectly acceptable thing to do. The other thing is, I'm not an ex-Muslim like Kai, so I don't have any practical experience or knowledge of what it's even like or to be a Muslim. So I kind of wanted to immerse myself a bit more in that so that I can understand the perspective and put myself in the mindset of the people who, in the mindset of Muslims, basically, because it's like reading literature, right? Like you need to, when people read literature from, say, let's just say that biblical stuff, they end up, really good biblical scholars will travel over to those areas to visit the historical sites and experience what it's like in those areas and try to put themselves in the shoes of those individuals. So that's me. So I'm dialoguing with Muslims. I want to be able to put myself in their shoes. It's that simple. And yeah, so I think that pretty much addresses all of that. So without further ado, this is just to prove that I did it, right? This is me with Sheikh Asrar. By the way, he is like 6'2". He's like the same height as me, I'm pretty sure. So he doesn't look tall when you see him on video, but he's like 6'2". So anyway, yeah, he wrote this book, Islam Answers Atheism, and he gave it to me for free so I could read. And by the way, that's a good book, not just for addressing atheism, but for actually kalam. It's actually got some really good kalam stuff in there. So how do I know Sheikh Asrar? Well, he's a good friend of mine, and I was referred to him through one of his students about I think over a year ago now. And so we've just been exchanging text because the original intention was to organize a debate with Jay. And obviously that was over a year ago now. So it's been a long time between now and then. So we agreed I would come visit. Oh, by the way, one more thing is if you have Muslim friends and you want to invite them to church, imagine if they had that kind of attitude like, oh, I can't go in there because it's evil and satanic. It's like if you're with someone who's willing to reciprocate, seems reasonable to me. But anyway, what do I know? I only have a hieromonk, advising me. So anyway, so yes, that's how we became friends. And the original plan was to film my visit, but I kind of wanted to just soak it in instead of trying to. It would have been like if I came with a notepad and tried to write everything down. I really just preferred to soak it in. So anyway, this is the mosque I visited. It's called Gamkol Sharif Masjid. It's in Birmingham. I think it's like the second biggest mosque there, or it's one of the. I don't know. I think it's one of the biggest mosques in the UK. I'm pretty sure. And so, why is it called Gamkol Sharif? This is something that was explained to me there. So there's this guy called Hazrat Zinda Pir Sahib, who was basically a saint. So it seems like mainstream Sunnism does have a concept of sainthood. And this is him on the top right. And this is actually a shrine in Pakistan where his basically his, I think that's his tomb. I'm pretty sure that's his tomb. And look, do you see how it's almost kind of similar to how we treat our saints. You know, we'll preserve them we'll dress up their. I mean, if you're aware of the process, is the saints' relics get kind of clothed and washed every. I don't know. I think it's like annually or something like that. If there's a body that is, or I'm not exactly sure, but anyway, they do that. They dress up the saint, his body, and beautify the area. So I thought that was interesting. Apparently this is controversial. I don't know why it would be controversial, but I think I'm pretty sure this is mainstream. So yeah. Well, if it's one of the biggest mosques in Birmingham, it must be mainstream. So anyway, moving on. So this is just what the exterior looks like. I think it's a relatively new building. But here's the first thing that hits you when you walk in. You just see this big expanse of carpet. And before I'd actually come here, I'd gone with Sheikh Asrar to his own mosque, which is a lot smaller, and I'll show some pictures of it at the end. And point out some more details, perhaps later. But there isn't really much to talk about. On the walls, you have different pictures of different things. So there was a picture of some sites over in, I think it was Mecca and Medina. And I'll show you a picture of something that I did find rather interesting. But this is pretty much what you get when you walk in. You just get this kind of expanse of carpet. It's quite cozy. It's very quiet. And yeah, people are just, doing their prayers. And this is the other thing that's around. So this is the Wudu area. So this was actually interesting to me. So it's kind of like you walk in and, you have this big expanse of carpet, but also on the side, you'll have kind of these, it's kind of like a swimming pool kind of flooring, I guess you could say. And they have these places for them to do their kind of ritual ablution so they can do their prayers. And I thought this was interesting because it's like a special made area for that. And it's really clean. It looks really nice. So that's that. So this is one of the pictures on inside the actual mosque that I found interesting. So they also have a concept of relics. Just like saints, they also have a concept of relics, and these are all supposed to be relics of Muhammad. So like his shoes, his bow, and stuff like that. And I guess I found this interesting because I didn't expect them to have, or even really think about having, like this amount of relics. This kind of the extent of things. So that was new to me. And yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of controversy over whether or not, I imagine there'd be a lot of people who think this is probably fake, or how high criticism is with various relics in our church. So my thought would just be, I mean, if we're doing apologetics, I don't really see the need to, unless someone can convince me otherwise, I don't really see the need to kind of claim all this stuff is like fake or something. I mean, it seems to me like we can just believe that's legit. Oh, and by the way, the other interesting thing is he was explaining to me how when the Sunnis kind of took over Christian areas, they basically took the Christians on their word in terms of where different sites were. So I think someone said it was like the burial places of certain of the apostles, or something relating to Mary, and basically the Christians had basically preserved these sites, and the Sunnis, when they came, or at least as I understand from Sheikh Asrar, who told me, was the Sunnis just kind of took the Christians on their word in terms of those being the places, and basically treat them as if they were legit holy sites, which was interesting to me. So then I went upstairs, and this is the big chandelier in the center of the ceiling. There's not really much to talk about because, as I'll explain later, none of the kind of ornaments in the mosque actually have any kind of theological meaning, I guess you could say. They're just there for being pretty and practicality a lot of the time. So this is the image I had on the thumbnail. So this is, if you see these little dials here, I thought this was quite, like, again, I'd never seen this stuff before. So, but they straight up have these timings for when various prayers during the day are, and this obviously changes based on during the year, during the seasons. And so they actually have these, and I thought that was interesting. So here's this thing called the prayer niche, is what Sheikh Asrar told me. And apparently it relates to the fact that when certain, I think, Byzantine buildings or churches were turned into mosques, they just kind of inherited this kind of architectural feature. He didn't really explain beyond that, but it seems to me it's not necessary, apparently. But that's where the imam will stand to lead the prayer. But apparently it wasn't necessary. It's not necessary at all to have that kind of thing. And again, it has no theological meaning. Same for the seat with the 3 steps, which apparently, according to Sunnah, has the 3 steps. But that's where the, I think it's called a Minbar, I think. It's where the imam will kind of say his sermon. And I think those doors at the top are to represent the doors of the Kaaba, I think. But yeah, again, none of this stuff has, apart from the calligraphy, none of these items. I mean, if you watch the Old Testament liturgy video, you'll see that everything has theological meaning to it. There's a reason for it. It was part of the temple. It's a remnant of the temple, or it has some kind of Christological theological meaning. But none of it has any theological meaning, which was just fascinating to me, because I kept asking Sheikh Asrar. I kept being like, so what does this mean? So what is, and it's like nothing. Honestly, it's just there. It's just practical. So it's tempting to kind of make connections or draw some similarities between perhaps the temple and what we see here, but there really is no connection. So those were the pictures I took. I was going to say, Sheikh Asrar was an excellent host. He treated me extremely well. Basically took me and because I went with an ex-Muslim. There was kind of a sense of that there might be some kind of tension or something. But nope, not at all. No tension whatsoever. It was totally chill. And it was really nice. He paid for dinner and everything. It was really lovely of him. I hope I can repay the favor to him if I come. Hopefully, God willing, I'll come back. But yeah, so that's just what I wanted to show you about that. So that's upstairs. So this was his mosque. Again, it's a small. So again, I just wanted to snap this dial because I just find that I don't know. Just to me, it's so new. I remember I was an atheist before I became Orthodox. So my experience of kind of structured religious structured religion was non-existent. Orthodoxy was pretty much the first I had. And again, look, we have the prayer niche here. We have the seat. And yeah, they really like symmetry. I noticed this as well. And the thing I wanted to say is just before I came to the mosque, I didn't kind of understand what the appeal was of Islam. So obviously, if you learn about Islam through the internet from a Christian perspective and you're doing apologetics, you learn about all the kind of unsavory stuff about Islam. But when you're on the ground, what it really is it's kind of cozy, really. I mean, it's a carpeted floor. You walk in, everyone's incredibly kind. Apparently you can just sort of stay inside the mosque, and as long as you're quiet, you can kind of be with a group of people and read. And so when I was in Birmingham, there were actually two dawah stalls. So if you know what that is, it's basically Muslim evangelists. 2 dawah stalls. And if I think about it from the perspective of the Englishman, just like, guys, I just want you to kind of just think about this. From the Englishman who has completely rootless, who's lost his religion, and then as long as he gets over the cultural concern, he comes across Islam, and it's just basically presented to him as, well, it's just worship of one God, do your prayers. There's the 5 pillars also, give charity, maybe go on Hajj, hopefully once in your life, to Mecca. And you walk in and it's just carpeted floor, it's quiet, it's peaceful. I don't know how to say it. I mean, I understand kind of what the appeal is if you're not aware of all the extra stuff that gets brought up in apologetical debates. If that's all it is, if it's just this kind of peace and this kind of simple belief, then yeah, it's really not. It's not. I can see how someone would be drawn into that, which I didn't before, and so yeah. I think that pretty much sums it up. So Sheikh Asrar and his student were excellent, and he was an excellent host, and his student, I just want to sing basically high praises of them if ever they see this. I don't know if they will. And I also found it very interesting to be able to kind of slip myself in the shoes of that kind of individual. So if there's any questions or anything, I'm happy to take them. I actually really don't like this format, but yeah, I'm happy to actually just go through Q&A or something. Yeah, so about the moons and the crosses, I remember Sheikh Asrar told me about this. The moon actually has no. So I know that a lot of people and some scholars have suggested that the moon symbol comes from basically Arabian paganism and astrological worship and stuff like that. But apparently it was just a symbol of the Turkish people, nation at the time that just took over, and then that was that. So I don't know, either could be true. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. So I'm looking at this. I'm just looking at the chat. Sainthood in Islam is nothing like in Christianity. I'm not saying it's nothing like. I'm not saying it's 1-to-1 with Christianity, but it's not like they're just mere people who kind of just die, and that's that. And it didn't seem like extreme Sufism because this was a mosque, a big mosque, and Sheikh Asrar said this was pretty much the majority of Muslims there. So I don't think it's extreme. And yeah, so there's this moment when the prayer was over, and then they all kind of chanted this song. I didn't understand it, but apparently it was to do with this saint or something like that. And yeah. So yeah, it says it's really important to immerse in the whole Muslim experience for flourishing of Christian Muslim. So yeah, I actually agree with that. I mean, I don't want to go too far, but I want to be reasonable about it. So just to give some heads up about what's going on in the channel, by the way, is I've pretty much finished up a script for a big video on metaphysics and classical Islam, and Kai is also working on a big one. And that's going to go up on the channel. I've considered doing memberships for the channel because buying all the books to learn about theology and stuff is pretty not cheap. So I'm thinking of doing membership and then just kind of recycling that money to just buy more books so I can produce more videos. There's not really another way around it, really. Oh yeah, and the dome and stuff like that. Yeah, because I mean, for us, obviously, the dome has a theological significance, but for them, it's just, yep, we just took this and that's that. We just got influenced by business and architecture, didn't import any of the theological meaning from it whatsoever. So if anyone has any questions, did you get to eat any legit Middle East food? Okay, so yeah, he took us out for dinner and he said I need to try like proper, like real Pakistani curry, not like British curry. And I'll say this, it was delicious. It was amazing. But the next day I woke up and had like acid reflux all day. Apparently it's because Sheikh Asrar was like white stomach. So there you go. I need to like train my stomach. It was a karai. It was a lamb karai. Some. That's what I think. That's what it was called. As an American coming out of atheism, the simplicity and structure was very appealing. It was only later that the issues arose and led me to look elsewhere. Yeah, that's just exactly what Kai said. He said, so how did he frame it? He said, you join because of all that stuff and then you're comfortable and then you sort of start asking questions and your questions don't really get answered. And then over time, the prayer, like, you know, the constant kind of legalism, I guess you could say, sort of catches up to you and it kind of tips you over, I guess. Plus compounded with your questions not being answered, or that's what he said. And again, I'm not an ex-Muslim, but that's what I've heard from other Muslims, ex-Muslims too. But see, look, I know, like, I see it. I see it. I understand the appeal. I think it's called Jumma. I actually want to learn a bit more about this. So I don't know if Jumma is just let's do one of the 5 daily prayers in the mosque, or if it's actually kind of a service unto itself. Because what a lot of them will do is they'll just go to the mosque to do their 5 daily prayers. And I don't know if Jumma is just like, let's just go to the mosque on Friday at whatever the morning prayer is at that time, and then there's just a long sermon or a long Quran reading or something. So I was under the impression before I did my Orthodox liturgy video, I was actually under the impression that Islamic kind of worship was a lot more liturgical and complicated like ours, because ours is really complicated, but it's not apparently. So do you have any more questions you didn't ask with regards to mosque? I don't, it's hard to kind of just think about questions on the spot, you know, but I suppose looking back, I'd like to ask more questions. But when I was at dinner with Sheikh Asrar, I asked him, we started talking about kind of how he viewed the prophets, or how he said Ash'ari Islam viewed the prophets. And he says things it'd be kind of impious for us to talk about, I guess, but he said that like the prophets were so holy that they didn't even have like body odor, or it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird to talk about, but their excrement was like pure or something and didn't smell bad. So for me, that was kind of like, we just wouldn't talk about like that with about our saints, but I did find something. I might do a short video about that with respect to Christ, I think. Anyway, I'll talk about that another time. But yeah, so he said that prophets are basically, they see them like kind of angelic beings. And again, I'm not sure that's mainstream or not, but that interested me anyway. Do you think Orthodox Christians are not as welcoming? If so, what needs to be changed in our approach to evangelism? I think it depends where you go. I think different ethnic traditions have different kind of reactions to people who are new in the church. In my experience, if you're like in a fully ethnic Russian parish, it's not so. You need to kind of know the people, or at least one person there before you go, and then they would treat you basically like their son. You kind of need to kind of crack through a little shell. With the Greeks, it's the other way around. Like, I think they're super welcoming. I think with Slavic peoples, generally maybe a bit more back, and then with Greeks maybe, and perhaps I assume Arabs, a bit more forward and a bit more open. But on the whole, yeah, they would be quite welcoming. If we need to change in our approach to evangelism, well, when I spoke to Sheikh, he said, I mean, this isn't the Orthodox Church's fault or anything, but basically when the Muslims came to Britain, basically I assume they just got a bunch of Protestant missionaries. That's what he made it sound like. And so obviously they just got all these kind of odd views about authentic Christianity, which I feel like if we're talking to Muslims, we need to kind of dredge up and replace with traditional Christian theology and traditional reverence for Christ, traditional Christology, and all this kind of stuff, which has just been kind of abandoned. And so I'd say that. But I'd also say that the dawa stalls, where you just have a stall where you set out with like leaflets and just have people there to answer questions and talk to people, I think that's a far more effective mode of evangelism than, like, that's an effective mode of evangelism, I'm convinced. So what did I see? I saw 2 Dawa stores in Birmingham, but then I also saw this one Christian dude, or this one Protestant dude, with like a loudspeaker, and he was just like churning out biblical texts, and I was like, that's just not good. I'm sorry, that's just not going to work, you know. Jummah replaces the second prayer on Friday, right? So I thought, right? So I thought. I'm trying to find. Was there anything else to discuss with Sheikh Asrar other than what I just mentioned? Well, we discussed theology, we discussed Kalam, we discussed Christianity. I explained some things about Christ that we believe that Protestants might not necessarily believe. Yeah. What is the conversion process? How long does it take? I was wondering what people did when they joined Islam. So I think, and I don't know because I've never been a convert and I've never seen anyone converting, I think that you just say the Shahada, which is a few phrases, when you're ready. And they'll just take you at your word when you say you're ready. And they'll give you a Quran, an English translation of the Quran. And then I assume they'll just teach you how to pray, and they expect you to do your 5 daily prayers, and they'll tell you what the 5 pillars are. And I'm pretty sure that's all you get when you convert. Like, they just give you the basics, like what you need to be a Muslim. Jummah replaces the Zohar afternoon prayer on Friday. It's compulsory to attend in the mosque, otherwise you will be praying Zohar. Okay. Interesting. So it is compulsory to attend. I'd be interested to learn more about It's compulsory for males, so not for females. Okay, interesting. I didn't know that. How does a Christian living in the UK should view and reflect about the rise of Islam in the UK? I mean, for me, the bottom line is that, you know, if you can't, you know, you should, if they're, I mean, it's mostly due to birth rates. I think I read somewhere that the retention rate for converts to Islam is pretty abysmal. It's like 25% or something like that, something low, whereas Christianity is like 60 or 70, depending on the sect. So I'd say as Christians, we need to do a lot better. We need to start forming communities. I think the best person to learn about this stuff, and I'm going to have him on in July, is Bob Speaker's Corner. I think he's got some very I don't agree with him on every single thing, but I think he's got some very good ideas and approaches, I think. So yeah, that's who I'd refer to. Don't you need to be circumcised to be a Muslim too? Actually, I didn't ask about this. I think you do, but I think they won't like press you on it. So I don't know. Are you familiar with Sheikh Mahdi Locke? I know who he is. I'm not familiar with him, not personally, no. I thought it was the other way around, like Greeks being pretty... It depends, right? So you get the kind of like the super ethnic gatekeeping Greek parishes, but then you get like the opposite. At least in England, it's not like that at all. Like the Greeks are really welcoming. Invite Sam Shamoon. Yes, we've had him on. We've had him on the channel before. It is clear, at least to me, that you have an affinity to this sheikh as a person. To what extent do you believe what he explains about Islam? You're right. I do have an affinity to him as a person. I like him. In terms of to what extent do I believe what he explains about Islam? Basically, I know he's an expert in... So the reason I knew him in the first place was because I was trying to learn Islamic theology, and I was looking up stuff about that. And he has lectures on key creedal texts and theologians in Kalam. So he's an expert in Kalam. So that's how I got introduced to him, was because I was learning theology. So in terms of at that level, in terms of the theology, I would go to him for kind of clarification if I need it, and sometimes I do. But in terms of other things, I will take his view and I will like take it on its face as basically for his word. And then if I see stuff that's kind of contradictory, I will bring that to him and ask him how he resolves that. But there wasn't that much time to do that kind of stuff. It was kind of just more being friendly, I guess, most of the day. And obviously he's really busy, so I can't just bring every kind of fiqh issue to him and every hadith to him. But I did bring some issues to him that are kind of pop level. And he tried to answer them. And he also referred me to his book, which I'm pretty much about to finish. And apparently he addresses a lot of that stuff in there. So on the whole, I'd say I take everything he says Kalam pretty much, unless I really disagree, but I pretty much take everything. I've not had that moment yet. Pretty much everything he says about Kalam, I pretty much on its face. When it comes to other things, I will take his view. I'll defer to him, but I'll take it with a grain of salt. I'm confused. Whose channel is this? Most times it's a guy named Kai. How are you? Yeah. It's like 50-50. I'm Lewis, and me and Kai co-own the channel. When are you going to visit a Shia mosque? Is there much different? I had planned to. Sheikh Asrar wanted to take me to a Shia mosque, but then it just didn't happen. Just too busy. So that was that. But in principle, I wouldn't be opposed. So. Did Sheikh Asrar ask you about Christianity, our belief traditions? Was he interested in that? He didn't seem mega interested, but I basically filled him in on it. So, yeah. Blessed feast of Saints Peter and Paul. I pray through their intercession Muslims come to know Christ just as they did. Ameen. Let me see here. What led you to Nudu wanting to study Islam? I think it would be a few things. So, first of all, I have a general kind of intrigue about the Middle East. Because I worked as a waiter in a Moroccan restaurant for a while, like for most of my teen years. And I fell in love with the food. And so that kind of led me into learning more about the Middle East and stuff like that. And obviously Christianity is a thing. It was born in the Middle East. So yeah. And then on top of that, it's the second largest religion next to Christianity. And I don't find Judaism super interesting, but I do. I don't know. I just find it so. I find it to be such a strange religion. I guess that's why it intrigues me. Did you and him ever bring up St. John of Damascus and his? We didn't actually know. We didn't talk about that. My friend who was with me pretty much was asking him most of the questions on Kalam. I started talking to him about a topic which like I said, I've made a long script on, and I've will be making a video on to publish soon. So you'll see that. But I talked to him about that, but he didn't seem that interested in that aspect of Kalam. And yeah, it was basically kind of, yep. I think Islam's more peaceful than MSM says. I don't think it's a faith that promotes terrorism, but grooming gangs made me curious. Did Sheikh explain why these problems exist in Muslim communities? Okay, so I actually didn't ask him about the grooming gangs. I'll say this much, though. I did ask, well, I was kind of just getting an impression of Birmingham. So I was in Birmingham, and I went through all the really highly Islamically populated areas. And I know the MSM, at least, I know Fox News has said that there are no-go zones. And I went to those no-go zones, and they're not no-go zones. Sheikh Asrar said that pretty much he thinks the only thing that would really get you kind of physically removed would be if you had if you started waving an Israeli flag around or something. Perhaps also wearing a T-shirt that has mocking Muhammad also. Didn't ask him about that, but I'm going to say probably. But it was weird because it didn't, I mean, other than the architecture, Birmingham isn't a very nice city, guys. It's not a very nice city. And I don't know, so one thing I also noticed as well was that I spoke to other locals who aren't Muslim, just kind of English people, but also people who are ethnically mixed. And I can really sense a tension there. There's really it's not outspoken, but I do sense a tension there, and kind of a resentment at the large. I was with a cab driver, and he said that apparently the South Asians who own who are majorities in housing areas, when someone who's not South Asian wants to get a house there, they'll prevent that person from getting the house. That's what the cab driver told me. I don't know if that's true, but he was talking from personal experience. He was actually Arab. So that was it. Yeah, that was a thing. Um, when did you become Orthodox Christians? About 5 years ago. About 5 years ago. I'm trying to see any more questions. We must define no-go zones. So my understanding of what a no-go zone was it's somewhere that like white people aren't allowed to be in. That was what I'd heard about no-go zones. So I mean, at least for Birmingham, it doesn't. If that's what a no-go zone is, then it doesn't seem true, like remotely. So yeah, I think I'm gonna end up the stream soon. So I'll take like 3 more questions, and then I'm just gonna end it. What do you find appealing in Orthodoxy? Well, my concern, I suppose, when I converted from atheism, my concern was kind of what's true religion. I didn't extensively research Islam when I made my choice. But the reason why that was because I wanted to, my system started with history. So I was verifying religions based on historical consensus on things. And so for the fact that the Islam teaches that Christ wasn't crucified and didn't die and came 600 years later, for me, I was verifying the Quran by history, historical consensus and historical scholarship. And so that's one reason why I just kind of initially, but sorry, to answer your question, I found Orthodoxy appealing because, first of all, there is beauty in Orthodoxy, first of all, so just on that level. But also I was convinced of the crucifixion resurrection account. And that was the main reason. I was just genuinely convinced of the crucifixion resurrection account. I had a problem with nihilism, so that's why Christianity specifically. And out of all the Christianities, Orthodoxy seemed to me just the most obvious was the one that had actually retained the tradition of the apostles and the tradition of the early church. Because when I converted, my thought was, I want to be like the earliest Christians. That's how I think. I think, for me, I'm thinking about tradition all the time. I'm trying to think about what is the church or what is the Christian group that is most like the earliest Christians. And I mean, Protestantism, there's not really much to discuss there. And so it's kind of just between Catholicism and Orthodoxy. I really found the Latin Mass very attractive. But I found Orthodoxy to be much more in line with the early church based on my research. And I'm not going to go into that here because that's just not really relevant. But that's what I found appealing in Orthodoxy. I can't get my head around that around 90% of Muslims support Labour. Could you get a sense why such conservative people support an LGBT? Because, and this is what I think, and I might be wrong, but I think it's because of immigration. I think there's this kind of, and also I think it's because of immigration, and again, I could be wrong about this totally. And this isn't a hill I'm going to die on. I think it's immigration, and I think it's, I think they perceived Labour as being less hostile to foreigners, and also more. I mean, this whole idea of it being for the people who are not as rich, kind of thing, right? It's not for rich people. Labour appeals to the people, or is supposed to appeal to people who have less money, and who are not as wealthy. And obviously, lots of immigrants who come here from Muslim communities, they don't come here and, become doctors or anything. A lot of them are doing, just normal kind of working class jobs. And so that's why as well. And I'll take one more question. What are do's and don'ts when talking to a Muslim friend? It depends on how they are. It depends on how easily offended they get. If they're very chill, if they've got quite a rock solid, nothing really phases them, then I mean, usually friends expect honesty from one another, right? So you can just say what you believe, I should think. But if they're not, if they're easily offended, if that kind of stuff, I'd recommend just being gentle in your approach, and just apply a gentle pressure. Just ask them questions. Just be like, well, why do you believe this? What do you think of this? Bring them something, like bring them a hadith or something like that, and just be like, what do you think of this? Could you, and then maybe they'll be like, ask my imam, and that kind of stuff. So I will actually take this question because someone gave some monies. Is the Trinity the biggest barrier for Muslims? I don't think so. All right, I at this point, I'm not convinced that that's so. I think you'd have to come and ask ex-Muslims, but from a lot of the ex-Muslims that I've spoken to who've become Christian, or at least Orthodox, the main reason I keep hearing for their converting to Orthodoxy is, one, the continuity with the Old Testament and the prophets, which they didn't think Islam had. Two, the history, that the Christianity and the Orthodox Church is rooted in history. Those are the two reasons that pretty much every single ex-Muslim who became Orthodox I've spoken to has said. So I think that if they're convinced of that, I think the Trinity just kind of naturally falls into place. I mean, most people don't treat their concept of the nature of God as like kind of some kind of philosophical, like hard philosophical puzzle they have to solve, I think for a lot of people, it's ultimately just about is this what's revealed? Is this what the prophet said? And if it is, then there you go. Did Sheikh regret the Jay Dyer debate? I think Jay won pretty easily, but much respect to the Sheikh for this charity and respect. No, he didn't regret it. I didn't get any sense of that, and he didn't talk about it extensively either. He just sort of asked me what my opinion was, and I told him what my opinion was, and that was that. Again, there was like no tension. Thanks everyone, by the way, for the super chats. I've actually never received super chats before, so it's just like I need to actually get in the habit of doing this. So thank you, Karnale. Thank you, Landbeor. Thank you, Scythe. Thank you, Athanasius of Finland. Thank you to everyone basically who gave super chat. Really appreciate it. Mura, I speak about that. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed. Keep posted for the interview with Father Stephen de Young. It directly concerns biblical theology, the Old Testament, basically history, and anything I've missed. Okay, another. You need to stop giving me money, dude. I'm not that I'm not that important. Thank you so much. Do you think Sheikh supports the Muslim immigration to the UK to turn Britain into a caliphate, or does he have a desire to convert the people to Islam? So here's something I realized about Sheikh Asrar, and then this is the last thing I'm going to say. So don't give me any more super chats after this. I think Sheikh Asrar, he was raised in Britain, right? So he went to school in Birmingham, and from reading his book, he cites and he quotes a lot of British poetry and literature and stuff like that. So, and I said this to him, and he was kind of, he seemed kind of surprised that I pointed this out or realized this, but I think he has a genuine appreciation for like British literature and to an extent British culture. So whether or not I think he wants to turn Britain into a caliphate, I'm not sure. I'd have to ask him. But I think one thing I'd want to ask him would be, the British people, produced all this literature that you love. So do you think Islam would be a sufficient kind of glass to continue to hold that cultural tradition, or do you think it would just kind of be destroyed? So I don't know. I didn't ask him that. So yeah, that's everything. Cool. Have a wonderful evening, day, afternoon, whatever, wherever you are. And I hope I'll see you guys for the Father Stephen interview. The Father Stephen interview, you will want to come to the Father Stephen interview. Have a wonderful day.